Welcome to Odor Always Moves, the video series that translates the complexity of odor movement down to the operational level for canine handlers and trainers. This is the fourth video in the series and the first of two parts where we're going to be looking at odor movement inside buildings caused by the exterior wind. And we're going to be looking at the influences of eddies and flow, opening locations and sizes, and then also the concept of a flow diversion. As always, these are dedicated to my first mom dog, Daisy. And these are for educational purposes only. This is just to show concepts, so if you want anything more detailed, reach out to me or others. But this is just to give you the concept of odor movement due to various conditions. Now we're going to be looking at a single type of building here, and we're going to use it in all our scenarios. And it's going to have three source locations for odor. These all emit the exact same quantity, the exact same properties, and it's just to show in different locations how those particular odors, they will move based on the different conditions outside. And in each of the models, the wind is always going to coming from the left, and it's going to be 10 miles per hour, so 4.4 meters per second. And that's, it's going to stay consistent. So the only thing that's going to change is the openings, what doors are open. So for the first scenario, we're going to look at a regular sized door, but it's opening on the upwind side of the building. And then the second scenario, we're going to look at the exact same thing, a regular sized door, but we're going to look on the downwind side and see, what's the changes there. And then the third is going to be it's a large garage door that's going to be fully open, but it's inside a carport, so it's kind of a non-symmetrical side of the building. And we want to look at how does that complicate things, if at all. And then scenarios 4 and 5, they're going to be a regular sized door, but they're going to be on that opposite side of the building, and it's a flat side, so it's a symmetrical, even flow side. So you've seen that on the second video, on the Bernoulli principle, where that flow going along the side of the trailer house caused low pressure and it would pull stuff out. Well, we want to see how that is in this setting. And so we're going to look at that. And there's going to be two different scenarios on that same side. The reason being is we need to look at whether the door is opening into the wind or against it, because that may have an impact. And then the last one, we're going to look at multiple openings. We're basically going to, so all the sides of the structure have garage doors. We're going to have all of those with gaps, like basically as if all the seals were bad in them, just to give a lot of potential pathway for the wind, just to see how that may impact it. Now, the things to remember in all of this is just go back to the basics. And in video 1, we covered advection. If the air is moving, the odor's moving with it. That's the key. And then we're going to just remind you of the Bernoulli's principle and eddies and how much of an impact those have. And so if you need a refresher, go back to videos 1 and 2, kind of get brought back up to speed. And then the size and the location of the openings relative to the wind flow have an impact on that interior air movement. And then the faster the wind, the greater the impact. And then lastly, the more interior rooms that exist in the structure and the size of the structure can minimize that interior odor movement when windy. So a good example, we're looking at a warehouse, big open space, and a lot of potential pathways for the wind. But in an office building, you're still going to have some impact when you open up that door, getting ready to do entry, but it's going to be very localized to right in that immediate area, just because of hallways and doors, and if there's a lot of office spaces in there. So kind of keep that in mind. Scenario 1. This again, we're going to do the upwind side, and the odor sources are what they are. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the animation on this one because literally this is the extent after 10 minutes. It's pretty boring. Okay, that odor really is not going anywhere. And if you remember, the red in terms of the odor is 100 times more concentrated than the blue. Okay, And so what's going on? It's like the wind is on the upwind side, that door's open. What's happening? Well, when I look at the air speed, and if you want to kind of look at this, so this area in this light purple, light, I don't even know what the heck, scarlet, I don't know what color this is. It's basically zero air velocity. Okay, it's not moving. And that's why the model showed that. It just wasn't going anywhere. But what's important to understand is if you look on this upwind side, there's a zone where there's no wind velocity. Okay, a lot of wind velocity going up and around, which we expect. Okay, but there's nothing going on the inside because of this pocket here. Now, when we look at the air, the direction of the air molecules, keep in mind these arrows are just pointing in the direction that that molecule is moving at that time. It's not reflective of the speed. The color is what reflects the speed. And you can see that there's movement inside. It's just ridiculously slow. Okay, nothing that is tangible in the model. Okay, but you can also see these flows going up and around the side of the building, which we would expect. Now, if we take a closer look, though, you can even see that some of these arrows are pointing back out the door. And again, that's because of this dead air zone that is basically causing a no flow through this area. Now, if we look at just the streamers and seeing the particle flows up and around the building, you can see it wants to flow up and around, up and around. Remember, advection, we're talking fluid dynamics. Fluid always wants to take the path of least resistance. So if this door is open and there is no other openings, then you're not going to be detecting any strong odors. Won't be any pull of odor towards that entry point on that upwind side. Okay, that's just because the pressure is so much higher on this end, and there's no pathway for the air to get through it. Now, if there's any openings, and we'll look at that in part two of the videos, if there's any other openings, you'll see that it does have an impact. But if it's closed off and it's tight, it's not going anywhere. It's going to go up and around because it's lazy and it wants to take that path of least resistance. And that's why that odor didn't move very far within the building. So the openings on the upwind side have a little impact on the interior air movement and the odor transport. Um, really, it's not much, if any. And again, if there's going to be odor movement within the building in that context, it's likely going to be something mechanical, like a ventilation system or something in that nature. Okay. But what if we had put a larger opening, like a garage door? Um, yes, that can have a potential because now there's a larger pathway where you may get a swirling effect inside. But for a standard door, like if we're doing an entry, maybe doing a search for a suspect, or maybe doing a clear for explosives, we have to be mindful that on that upwind side, chances are we're not going to smell anything, or the dog's not going to smell anything until they get in deeper and get closer to the source. Okay. And then again, any openings on the side of the downwind portion will result in that interior air movement because then there's a pathway for it. We'll cover that in part two, scenario 6. Scenario 2, same thing. Okay, same building, same motor sources, but now the door's on this downwind side. We're going to take a look at the model, let it start playing out, and this is 10 minutes, just so you're aware. Okay, I speed it up. And you can see that it kind of paused out, and the reason for that is when the model starts, there's zero wind, and it accelerates up to that 10 miles per hour. And that's why you don't see that initial slow process in the beginning. But then you start seeing the effects, and all of a sudden you start seeing this odor pull all the way around, and you start seeing this start pulling up to this door. This one back here is not affected. It's too far back to really be influenced in that 10-minute time frame. Okay, so this is the extent, and it stays fairly concentrated. You have a nice plume, well-defined plume there, and in that 10 minutes time span. Well, let's take a look at what's going on in terms of the flows. If I look at the velocities, okay, you look at this like, well, hey, that's really similar to what the last one showed. There's no velocities, or very little. And one thing to look at is this darker blue here. You start seeing it come inside that door. And we'll zoom in there in just a second. But if I change the color scale of my velocity, this is where it more stands out. So I basically changed it so that we're seeing anything over 1 meter per second, which is a couple miles per hour, that you can start seeing that all of this area outside is at 1 meter per second or more, but you can see that it's also coming inside the building along this wall, and you have some pretty complex velocities right here. So what's going on there? Zoom in here, take a little bit better look at that. You can see it a little bit better. You can see that there is an area of 1 meter per second or more going inside along this wall. But the wind's going this direction. So let's find out what's happening here. Now, if you look at we're breaking back to basics here. If we're looking at this is the flow along the outside of a building. This is my wall. This is the interior. This is a door. Okay, right now that flow is going along. Now, if there's any gaps in that door, that Bernoulli principle, because of the low pressure caused by that flow, it'll pull out. But let's just assume that door's tight. Okay, it's closed, nothing's going on. But what's going to happen when we open that door? Particularly if we open it where it swings like this. Okay, let's see if I can draw that a little bit better. If it opens this way, what's going to happen there? So if I open that, what you see is the flow diversion. Okay, you can see the flow coming along. It hits this. It has to divide. Okay, it wants to take the path of least resistance. But part of it is going to go up and over. And when it does that, it creates an eddy on the backside. We've covered that in video too. And then, but the other part gets diverted. It's kind of like the rudder of a ship. Okay, that's or a tail of an airplane. That's essentially all it's doing, is it's routing the flow, and that flow is coming inside the building. Okay, at a decent speed. Okay, it's comparable. Now, obviously, if you're a canine handler on a team and you're doing your entry and you're parked right here, you're blocking that flow. So that'll have an impact on it. So keep that in mind. Your body position as a handler and with your dog, and maybe if you have cover officers with you, that can impact it. Okay, for the good or the bad. But if that flow, is allowed to hit that door and divert in, it goes inside the building, but it also starts pulling the air inside the building towards that opening. But it's not going to come out the opening. It's actually going to go with the flow that's entering. Now, this is important because if your odor source is on this portion up here, your dog will detect it probably upon entry of the door, okay? Especially if they check high and low, depending on where the source is. But here's the key. If that source is down wind of that, your dog's not going to detect it. Okay, so kind of keep in mind if you're doing an entry for a suspect or looking for explosives, those kind of things, we need to make sure that we're having our dog check that downward wind portion and not assume that it's going to detect it if it just makes the entry down in this portion here. Okay, so just some of the things to kind of keep in mind when we're dealing with flow diversions. Now, this is just the overall flow of the model space in that area. And this is those direction areas. And you can see these areas and kind of what's going on in the overall direction of the flow. But this is that eddy effect. So I got my main flow alongside the building, and it hits this corner, and it's going to create an eddy. Okay, and you can see that circular motion here. But that's why we're having a flow wrap around, is that this eddy is curving around here, hitting that door, and then basically diverting Some of it going on the interior, some of it going on along the exterior. And that's what's causing all of this, is this eddy effect from this corner. Now, if this door was shifted in a different location, may not have that much of an impact. But that's something to, kind of keep in mind. If you can feel that wind on your back as you're making that entry, or you're opening that door, just kind of be mindful of what it's doing when it's going inside the door and how it may impact how it's going to move the odor on the interior. And because of this flow coming in, it's pulling this air and whatever odor's in it towards the door. And then you'll notice that this motion here it's doing a little diversion right here as well, to where this flow is coming along, it gets diverted by this wall, and it starts doing a much slower eddy there. And that's why that odor down in this portion of the room was actually coming up towards this point, is it was being carried by this eddy caused by this opening here. Okay. Now, it is important to understand that this odor will be pulled to the door, but it won't be pulled out. The odor, and I looked at the model. I basically had to set the concentration super low to see, and basically it would hit the door and it would stop. And that's because of the flow coming in was carrying it, with it. Okay, so there was too much velocity for it to come outside the door. So just something to kind of keep in mind. And this is just another kind of visual of some of the streamers, just to see some of the pathway and the complexities of it in the building. So this is looking at it from the end, the wind's coming from the top. And you can see the turbulence down on this end caused by that eddy around that side. Okay, and this is that direction of that flow coming along the wall. It's hitting that wall and then it's routing back around. And then that in turn is pulling this flow, which is basically pulling air all the way from the backside of the building. Now here's the last one I want to cover on this one. Okay, this is just going to look at the arrows of direction, but we're going to see over time how it kind of spreads out through the building. And so we're just going to run it, and you can kind of see the complexities as it starts, slowly start reaching out. But for that initial time of the model, it's staying localized at the door, and that's because the wind speed is picking up. It hasn't stabilized its flow, but as the flow starts stabilizing, as the model continues, and that steady flow continues, all of a sudden the influence inside the building continues and goes further and further and deeper into it. So this is important to understand, that the longer that door is open, the greater the influence it's going to have on the interior airflow in the building, and thus the odor movement inside of it. Okay, and so this is just that flow. This shows you the complexity and the turbulence on the downward side of the building. This is really hard. Odor gets in here, it's broken up, it's spread out, it's diffused, so that it's much less concentrated just because of the turbulence. So kind of keep that in mind, that you're not going to be really detecting or not have as good a success rate working in this downward area. But as you start working along the walls and such and the doors, then you can start seeing it. But it could be complicated because of all that movement. So just another thing to keep in mind. So the lessons from that one: the openings on the downwind side do have some impact on the interior air movement, okay, and thus the odor transport. And the extent of this impact increases the longer the doors open. And then flow diversions, such as doors, can pull odor away from that entry point. So, scenario 3. Same thing, difference is, the odor sources, but now we have this big garage door in this kind of covered carport area. So kind of a non-typical situation. So let the model run, and you can see immediately it's quick. It's pulling down to that door almost within a minute. Again, this is a 10-minute model that's accelerated, but you can see everything else is being moved pretty dramatically as well. and it's spreading out. That lower concentration level is continually spreading out within the building, but it's not able to be as maintained. It seems to be breaking up, and you kind of see these areas where it's kind of establishes, kind of doesn't, but nothing really super concentrated. And that's kind of the biggest thing, is you can see that this low concentration does finally establish, and your dog's basically the moment it's in here. So this is after 10 minutes. It's in low odor concentrations almost throughout the entire building. The exception is down here in this room. Okay, there's no flow in there. But the concentration, the areas of concentration, is following this circular motion. Okay, and so that's something to kind of keep in mind. Your dog may make a circular pathway up to the source if it's really good at following the source or following the odor plume. Okay, and then this room, this one's probably a little more complicated in that it's got some pockets of concentration right at that entry, even though the source is way over here. And depending on what's in that room, that may make the search just a little more difficult, but just emphasizes the importance of detailing and making sure you're covering all the areas. Now, if I look at the streamers, okay, you can see there's a lot of turbulence inside this little carport area, and then you can see the pathways inside the building. It's all over the place. It definitely is moving, and it's all the result of the exterior wind. And if I look at it just a simplistic view, okay, I got my airflow coming here. It creates an eddy. This eddy's turning. This eddy in turn pulls the air, and it's also dividing. Remember, we talked about the diversion, and that's creating this, quasi-circular motion inside the model space, inside the main warehouse area, that's spreading out all the gases and making that area of low concentration just expand further and further. Now, if I look at the overall, just the actual direction arrows in a little more detail, because that last one was pretty simplified. If I got my airflow along here, okay, this is my high velocity flow. I create that eddy, okay, and I have that circular motion in here. And remember, I'm going to have that divide, that diversion right here at this doorway. And then that creates a flow this direction while at the same time pulling the air this way. This starts working down because it's being pulled. It creates a little eddy in and of itself. I have an eddy down at this end where I have a wall here. All of it, though, is pulling this down towards that door, but really not pulling outside the door again. And that's because of the flow, that diversion of the flow at that wall, where the garage door is. It's the odor comes down to it, but it never goes outside that door. It doesn't go outside the entry point. Okay. So the large openings and eddy effect have a significant impact on that odor movement within the building. I think we saw that. Low odor concentration was pretty much everywhere after 10 minutes. And this can result in the dog encountering low odor thresholds throughout the search area, and thus making localizing the source a little more difficult. And goes back to detailing and making sure you're covering all the areas. And then the longer that door is open, the more the odor is spread around. Okay, we've shown that multiple times already. So, just a quick summary of all three of these. Openings on the upwind side have minimal impact on the odor movement so long as no other openings exist. Openings on the downwind side will impact odor movement, and with the severity depending on where the opening is along that side and for how long it's open. And then flow diversions can pull odor away from the entry point. We saw that in the last two. And then large openings in inset areas can have significant influence on odor movement. And then eddies caused by the exterior airflow and the redirection of wind into the building are the dominant influences on that interior air movement. So coming up next, well, it's going to be part 2 of this video, okay, and we're just going to do the next section of that, and then The upcoming topics, again, I'm putting them together as I can. Building ventilation systems. Figured out some things in the model to accurately represent that a little bit better, and so still need to do that. SAR mountainous terrain. I actually have the modeling done. It's just cleaning it up and analyzing it and getting it in a presentation form. Urban terrain, Venturi effect. Again, have that modeling done. It's just again putting it into presentation format. And then buried hides. That's one I've actually been working with the software developer to accurately mimic that. And then we're going to work on thermal convection of air within a room and resultant odor movement. And then we're still working on vegetation's influence on airflows. And I'm even, after talking to the software developer, trying to work on the ways of doing tracking and looking at the different areas where maybe someone stops and rests and what odors they're leaving and how to accurately mimic that in the model. So we'll see. We'll see what the software is capable of doing. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and and hopefully you'll be able to follow the next part to this series to see the remaining scenarios. Thanks, and have a great day.